Hello there! I know, it's been a while. But seeing as my negative traits guide has aged like fine wine, this video will now be about the More Traits mod, Negative Traits Edition. We will be going through these in a fairly rapid fashion and we'll go through what they do, how we can counteract them, and if they are worth taking. In my opinion, of course. So without further ado, let us begin. Starting off this list is bad teeth. Because you never even knew what a dentist was, there is a chance to cause your character pain when consuming food. Eating larger portions potentially causes more pain. It only gives 3 points, so all in all, it's a bit of a bitch to counteract because you would need a steady supply of painkillers. Anemic, the trait that causes you to bleed much faster from wounds. It's not necessarily tough to deal with if you have fast fingers, but a word of caution, this trait is a double-edged sword. The real danger with this one is if you get a deep wound on your neck. If you aren't fast enough, your run will end faster than you can say Yahtzee. I've played with this trait a few times and honestly it was fairly manageable for the 4 points it gives. That is, if I didn't get damaged on my neck. The monk mode trait. Taking ascetic means you like the simple things in life and hate capitalism. You dislike cooked food and pre-packaged foods don't give any mood boosts. Not that big of a deal. Uncooked meals are neutral in terms of mood boosts. Oh, and you also have a high chance to burn cooked meals. If you're someone who doesn't really dabble much in cooking, like me, this trait does not impact you nearly as much. It's an easy 4 points to put into something else. Your character is the ultimate sad boy and is prone to random bouts of sadness. Sadness caused by depressive will stack until it's removed. It goes without saying that if you manage to find enough antidepressants, you can deal with the sporadic sadness episodes. But if you're unlucky enough not to find any, taking smoker will be the play here. Taking injured starts you off with some injuries, but you will start with these wounds bandaged. You won't be bitten, but you will have some scratches and possibly a deep wound or two. If you know what you're doing and are fairly decent at combat, taking this isn't really as scary as it seems. Even with slow healer, you can heal up the wounds relatively easily, so taking this will mean an extra 4 points to slam somewhere else. Now, this trait will add a little bit of spice to your playthrough. True to its name, paranoia will make your character randomly get scared and panic. Taking this trait will mean that you will need to be on top of your stress management, as naturally it will get much worse after a paranoia attack. Well, it's nothing a cancer stick can't solve, eh? And it's worth 4 points. Self-destructive reduces your maximum health relative to how unhappy you are. Now, this one is manageable if you keep a sharp eye on your unhappiness levels, stock up on books, cigarettes, and those hotties mags, and you have 4 points that you can put somewhere else. Oh, and also don't forget the antidepressants. While you spend time with all those delectable hotties mags, I think now's the perfect time to introduce you to this video's sponsor and my personal hosting provider of choice, Pine Hosting. You've ever felt alone while playing Project Zomboid? You know, surviving as the last remaining human on the planet? Well, why not make a server with Pine Hosting and get your friends to join in on the tomfoolery? Make a server within minutes and dive straight in. Or if you're the kind of person who likes tinkering with the sandbox settings, you can use their super easy to use panel to customize them to your heart's content. Feel like you need a little more spice? Then just use their built-in workshop installer to pop some mods into your server. Just add the mod ID and you're good to go. They also have global server locations so you can find the best connection for you, along with DDoS protection, and all for a really affordable price. I've hosted a few servers through Pine and honestly they have to be one of the most stable hosts I've ever had the pleasure of using. And if you've already got a server with another provider and want to switch over, Pine will personally help you move your server from another host. Or maybe you're just someone who enjoys watching PZ instead of playing it. They also do a wide variety of games from Minecraft all the way to Rust. If all of this has you frothing at the mouth and you want a little more, use my code TWEAK to get 30% off of your order, and use the link in the description to help support the channel. A massive thank you to Pine for sponsoring the video. Okay, ad over, now back to the traits. Student Driver, the final boss version of Sunday Driver. Taking this means you will drive slowly, make more noise, and on top of all of that, vehicles you drive will be much tougher to handle. This means that towing heavy loads will be an absolute nightmare, and maneuvering out of situations where you are swarmed will be near impossible. The only time I can ever recommend taking this is if you are attempting to roleplay or if you're in co-op where you don't drive cars that much. It's very tough to overcome and it's not worth the 5 points it gives in my opinion. This one is a rather interesting trait. Sun sensitivity grants your character a heightened sensitivity to sunlight. If you're caught outside in the blaring sun, you will experience headaches that will get worse with exposure. The only way to counter this will be to use an umbrella. But who's got time for that? Or pain pills, which would be a rather expensive way to deal with this one. The trait to take if you only plan on using melee weapons for your run. Because you hate guns, you will take longer to aim, your maximum range is reduced, and you will even become sad when using guns. Oh, and you also gain 25% less aiming XP, so yeah, don't take this if you plan on using firearms because it will be very hard to overcome. For someone like me who almost exclusively uses melee in my playthrough, this one is a free 6 points. Start the game as a rust naked. Deprive starts you off with absolutely nothing on you, not even clothes. This one isn't really as bad as it seems if you more or less know what you're doing. You can quickly cobble together some clothing from Zeds and nearby houses. The only downside is that you won't spawn with a belt, so if you are unlucky enough not to find one, you will suffer for a little bit. But it does make for a fun start, and I'd say that it's worth looking at for 6 points. Just make sure to find some shoes ASAP because you will be barefoot. Motion sickness. You get queasy when driving. The faster you drive, the faster you get sick. Now, I haven't tested this with being a passenger, but taking it at face value, it seems like it only works when driving, but don't quote me on that. I'd say this one is more of an inconvenience than absolutely game-changing, so it comes down to if you can stomach using it. You get 6 points for the trouble. Noodle legs. You have a higher chance to trip when running or sprinting. Now, considering that you shouldn't be doing too much of that in your playthroughs, it's sort of possible to work around this one. The chances to trip decrease with your nimble and your sprinting level. So if you are speccing into nimble in your build, it could help mitigate this trait. And if you play your cards right, you will do very little in the way of running or sprinting in the game, so you can minimize the risk. Fearful. Your character scares easily and is likely to scream if they are panicked. This one is problematic. Panic is something that you will almost always have, especially in the early game, and your character will basically press Q on their own, meaning you could attract attention where it isn't needed. It seems like it's mutually exclusive with veterans' desensitized traits, so you can't cancel it out that way. Honestly, it comes down to if you want to spice up your playthrough or not, and it gives 7 points, which isn't that bad. Taking Pack Mouse means that your character's maximum carry capacity will be reduced. It doesn't apply to containers, just your main inventory. Interestingly, you can still take Strong or Stout and Organized if you pick Pack Mouse. So you could use this trait to offset the cost of that combo if you choose to run with them. Now, before we move on to the rest, these next traits are stepping into challenge run / difficulty modifier territory. These are purely if you want to take them to make your run harder, build your character after a real life example. You get the idea. In essence, these are hard to counteract. Broke leg. If you've ever broken a bone in PZ, you know how freaking long it takes for it to heal. This means that you will start with a broken but splintered leg. In my opinion, this is purely for challenge runs or for added difficulty at the start. This trait is also common with other content creators who like to use it for their videos. Mundane. Basically, you were boring as fweck before the apocalypse. Your weapon attacks will never critically hit, and this includes any of the critical bonuses from the prowess traits that come with the mod. But all the damage bonuses from weapon levels will still stack normally. So, taking this simply means that it will take a little longer for you to weave your way through the hordes due to no crits, but it's still definitely doable if you're careful. It will just take a little longer. It also gives you back a hefty 9 points in exchange for a bit more time spent, so it's not too bad. Slow worker. As its name implies, you are generally slow at doing timed actions like cutting logs, crafting items, and more. Here's my hot take on this. If you're in it for the long haul, this is not a bad trait to consider, especially since you can speed up time in single player. Goes without saying that in multiplayer I would absolutely not recommend this, as it would be a pain in the ass. Going solo, well then it's 9 points for you. With this next trait, you may as well spend the rest of your life in a bubble. Immunocompromised means your immune system is about as strong as a wet noodle. Your wounds tend to become infected, and you have a 25% greater chance to become zombified. Now, we all know that if you get bitten in PZ, you are pretty much done for. What makes this trait so dangerous is that it overrides the transmission settings that you set in the sandbox options. Meaning, if you selected saliva only, taking this trait will still let you get infected from normal wounds. Take this one if you wanted to season up your playthrough a little bit, but this one is really tough to counter aside from just not getting bit. Incomprehensive. If you are a fan of the 10 years later mod or just like to make your life difficult by finding less things in containers, then pick this one. It's not too bad if you invest a little bit into foraging to help counteract it, as it doesn't affect forage drops, but will still make it feel like you're trying your absolute best to scavenge for supplies in a world where everything already has been stripped clean. Those extra 10 points are nothing to scoff at either. So this next one has to be among one of the worst on this list in my opinion. Made of glass is the definition of glass cannon minus the damage. You take twice the amount of damage from all sources, become scratched easier. A short fall can break your bones because your bones have the strength of a piece of spaghetti, and heavy encumbrance can result in severe damage. Good luck hauling all those extra logs back to base. There isn't really a way to get around this one as far as I can tell, so it falls very heavily into the challenge category of traits. It does give you 10 points, which ain't bad. Butterfingers causes you to randomly drop items that you're holding, with the chance being affected by your carry weight and other traits like dexterous or lucky. Could be a tad problematic during extended fights because, knowing us PZ players, our weapons will always drop at the worst possible time. But hey, you do you. Smoker's companion trait. Alcoholic is pretty self-explanatory, but for those of you who absolutely must know, you need to drink alcohol, otherwise you will expire. Taking this does mean that you will start with a bottle of whiskey, but pretty soon you will need to find yourself some more alcohol, otherwise your character will gradually become sicker. It gives you a hefty 14 points for the trouble though. If you've played PZ for any length of time, you've most likely come across some content creators doing a challenge with this trait. Amputee starts you off with a missing arm. How fun. So because you only have one arm, it does go without saying that you cannot equip anything to your secondary or use it for anything like two-handing a weapon. This one is purely for a challenge run, so take it if you are bored with a regular playthrough. As far as I know, there are mods to craft prosthetic limbs later on, so use that with this. It gives you back a hefty 16 points for the inconvenience though, so I guess it's worth trying if you're bored. This brings us to, in my opinion, the king of all negative traits that this mod offers. This one could arguably provide you with one of the most challenging starts in the game. Burn Ward Patient. Because of a freak accident that traumatized you, you start out covered with bandaged burn wounds. Your character gets panicked and anxious when in close proximity to fire, and the best part, you can't throw molotovs, firebombs, or even start any kind of fire. That also means no campfires, no antique stoves, nothing. It gives you a whopping 20 points for good reason. If you really want to ramp up the difficulty, then go for this trait. So for all my Molotov lovers out there, it sucks to be you. And that's it for the traits. Don't forget to check out Pine Hosting if you haven't already and get a server at a 30% discount using my code in the description. Thank you so much for watching, good luck out there survivor, and I will see you in the next one.